Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self improvement.
Absolutely. I remember after my kid went back into custody, um, I had got a different attorney um, than like my attorney. Like the judge just assigned me one, and I was like, okay, like I don't have to pay him, so whatever. Um, and I remember at adjudication, he was like, "So are you ready to terminate your rights?" And I was like, I really just feel like I need some help from the state to try to fix this issue. And he looked at me and he said, "After everything that you've been through, you're not willing to relinquish your rights." And I was like, mm. He said, "Okay, talk to me in a month. We'll be back here in a month for disposition. If you decide to, we can relinquish then." But he was just like dumbfounded. Like, you have been through hell and you just want to keep on fighting? Like, what? You know? And that was really eye opening for me also. And with him in custody, he went to a family member for less than a week, I think, and tried to blow their house up by turning on the gas to their fireplace, threatened her and her fiance with a fireplace poker, like within a week. And this was somebody that he claimed to just absolutely adore and want to live with. Like this was his goal. This was where he wanted to go because he just worshipped the ground she walked on. And within no time, he was trying to kill them too. And so now he's not able to be placed with a family at this time. Maybe in the future, I don't know. But I mean, the chaos continues even now. I get some updates on occasion, and it's just, he broke into somebody's house and they woke up in the middle of the night with him standing over them with a knife. I mean, it's chaotic. And it's really unfortunate the state that the mental health system and government entities even are in as far as like providing help to families who are dealing with all of this. It's, I mean, it should not get to the point of me demanding to have him removed from my home because he has continually tried to kill me or damage me in some way. Like it should not come to that. It should be like the first time you show up in my home and we tell you that he's violent and a threat, something should be done then and not 2 years later.
Um, it's just so wild to me. Like, because I also, like, I work for child welfare and not, like, in the same, like, department, but still, well, not the same, like, job. Same
Capacity?
department,
Yeah.
different job. And I've worked with kids in, like, psych hospitals, and I've worked with kids in all kinds of different settings, and, like, it's just so wild to me, like, the lack of help for any kind of, like, mental health situation, let alone like
Yeah.
violent ones, which you think there should be all kinds of hope for that because nobody wants to work with like violent children. Nobody wants
Right.
like those kids to be like out in the world someday being violent, but like absolutely nothing is available.
Exactly.
And that's the frustrating part for me is we know that the earlier the intervention, the more likelihood of a satisfactory outcome. You know, might not ever be great, but we can reduce those numbers somewhat. So why are we just like, no, there's no help, whatever, oh wait, eventually they'll be grown, they'll be an adult and we can put them in jail? Like, why is that your solution? But that's the only solution that I kept being given, was eventually she will victimize somebody outside the family. Now I was told that any crime she committed against family members was my problem to deal with. but eventually she will do something to somebody who's not family, which I don't know how, because it's a rural area. I'm related to 80% of these people. Um, and or she'll become an adult and then they will charge her. But why can't we get her help and treatment now? Because I understand, neuroplasticity is still a thing, and yes, you can get better as an adult, but it's harder. It's less likely to be successful. Why are we not doing it when they're young?
And why wait until there's even more victims under her belt or his belt?
And they're probably gonna thrive in prison, honestly. Like,
exactly,
where a lot of people are violent and aggressive, and that's just not like everybody, obviously, but there is that kind of like culture there of being violent and aggressive, and it's accepted. Like, they're just gonna thrive and
yes.
find their people.
As she went through different residential treatment centers, I can't remember where were we at, 4 or 5, I can't remember, because she went to the same ones. Like, there was a couple she went to twice, but yeah, so each time it was like a more secure facility, right? So the last one, which she had went to twice, is actually one that I had long called kitty jail for a very long time. But yeah, a little scary how much she thrived in that environment. And at one point, the first time, she was bragging about it. And that's when the therapist finally was like, okay, I'm concerned. Because she called me and she's like, I'm concerned. I'm like, what? And she's like, well, she was bragging about how she like strategically, makes sure she's at the top of the pecking order, and like, well, I guess she thought the bullying that she was doing of other patients, and because she does it in such a passive way, that she thought she was just being a normal teenager or whatever. And I'm like, but she's very astute at telling what your weaknesses is and going for that, pushing that button every time. And she'll very often do it in a way where she has a plausible deniability. And so I guess the therapist up until that point had just kind of made those excuses for her. And when she was finally open in group and told, no, I do this on purpose. And I've always done this. I've done this in every school I've ever been to, or facility I've ever been in. Like, this is like this. In fact, she was like, I don't understand why y'all aren't all doing this, because this is like the best way to live. Why wouldn't you? And so that was when that therapist finally realized, like, oh, you weren't lying about the callous and emotional traits. I'm like,
That's exactly.
But up until that point, they act like you're lying. Until they finally see it, they're like, you're just being unreasonable. I'm like, no, I'm just trying to like save you from going through that initial 3 weeks of being manipulated before you finally see it. But go ahead, do your thing. But I think part of the problem is because records, even if they get records, because of the way the insurance works, only things that show on those is what they bill for, like what will get them paid. So they always say something generic like major depressive disorder or anxiety. They don't have, okay, here's what we're actually dealing with. Because most of the time, the diagnostic code on there is not necessarily what you're dealing with. It's what the insurance is going to pay so that they can afford to keep the kid there to provide treatment.
Or it's going to be like DMDD, which could be a million things. God. Well, that's exactly how it was. Like, at the hospital I worked at, all of the kids would do the exact same thing that your daughter would do. Like, but it was our whole unit that would do that. Like, 20 children doing that all to each other constantly, like, and to the adults, like the adult staff. They would do that to us and like try to put us like against each other and like make us like act differently towards kids based on like what they would say like the kids had done. And I'm like, you did the same shit. Like, I can read your file. Like, I don't know what you're trying to get out of me by saying these things about these other kids and telling me things that they've done because they had all perpetrated. Like, you did the same shit. Like, I don't what. Like, they just wanted to get like all the snacks, and they wanted everybody to like love them so that they could get what they wanted, but they didn't give a fuck about anybody. Like,
Nice.
That's the thing, the transactional relationships, right? I said something very matter of factly because somebody asked me on TikTok about whether she's ever had any real friends. And I'm like, no, she doesn't have the ability to attach. And everything, she relates to people entirely in a transactional way. And somebody said I was being, what was the word? I don't remember, but I was being mean basically by saying that. I'm like, but that's just literally like, that's the diagnostic criteria for like, that's just the way it works. And I don't know why people are so intent on trying to pretend that's not what's happening. Like, that's just how our neurology is. She can't attach to people, and we can't pretend that that's not the case.
it's wild. Like, I don't think I would say like well, no, I take that back. I wouldn't say all of the kids that I worked with were like sociopaths. I wouldn't say any of them were psychopaths. Like, all of the kids I worked with had like really specific traumas that they went through that is probably like what triggered like all of their behaviors. And so they kind of like morphed into that, like out of survival, and then it just became like, this is what I have to do because I don't care about you, I don't care about any of y'all what y'all think. I'm gonna get what suits me, I'm gonna take care of me. And it's like wild to think that about a child. Like, because it truly is like everything is a transaction to them. Like, you're a vending machine to them because they want snacks, because that's the only currency they have in like a psych hospital is snacks. And like, they'll do whatever chores you ask them to do so that they can get those things, or they will tattle for things that didn't happen on other kids so that they can get what they want and like hurt that child, like the other child. I wish everybody could have the experience of like, one, working in fast food, because you see a lot of crazy shit with people that place, and then also like working with children that have these kinds of things, or sitting in different support groups for different people like of different kinds of things. When I was in college working on my degree, like, I had to sit on a batterers intervention group. That was terrible. I hated that shit. But I feel like if everybody could sit in on those kind of things, or even just like observe somehow, like, I think people would really understand like just how much the mental health like services and resources are needed.
So you mentioned that your attorney was advocating, you can't be charged with abandonment. So how did the civil process of abandonment go for you? Was that pretty smooth, or was child welfare,
I mean, it was really smooth. The investigator was not happy because he had to find my kid a home, and that it was difficult when you have a teenager without any behaviors, and then you add behaviors of any kind to that, and it's just like impossible. So he wasn't too pleased about it. But when it got switched over to permanency, his permanency worker was like, this child was not at risk, or like risk of harm or anything like that in this home. Like, we did the safety meeting, the child safety meeting that has to happen when you take custody. And she's like, I can't see any risk to this child. I see risk to mom. Like, you would never do anything to my husband at all, ever. And I remember the last day that he was in the house, before he ran away, he was like hitting and kicking and biting and scratching me. And I was trying to like hold him down a little bit. My husband got out of the shower and was like, "Is he trying to hurt himself?" And I was like, "No, he's trying to hurt me." And he was like, "You keep claiming that you're going to be abused. Continue to hurt my wife, and we're gonna see what's going to happen with that." And so when my kid left, I was like, "Man, like this is not a healthy situation for any of us because you know he's watching me get abused by a child, and there's nothing that he can do because he's a child, you know." And so when it came to child welfare, the permanency worker who had a background in law enforcement was like, I, you know, I cannot put him back in her home with it being like this. And I was like, well, that's good because I don't want him back in my home, like keep him away. um, and I mean, I think, well, I say this and I don't know if it's actually true. It feels true, but I don't, maybe it wouldn't have helped. I feel like if the court system had been more involved from the beginning of his criminal behavior, maybe there could have been a turnaround, but he went so long being able to get away with everything that he did. I mean, the child stole probably 150 phones within the community and the school because that was something I wasn't willing to give him. I'm sorry, when you're 11 years old and you're looking at porn on your tablet, you lose electronics. That's not an option anymore. And no, I'm not going to buy you a phone because you're going to use it to do inappropriate things, which is your pattern, you know? And I feel like if he hadn't been allowed to do things like that, maybe there could have been a difference, but I really don't know because it was chaos. It was absolute chaos.
Well, I'm glad you don't have to deal with it now. And you've gotten out of it, like, and gotten to calm waters a little bit.
Yeah, there was actually a video that circulated on Facebook that involved him. It's not on there anymore, but I think it is on TikTok. He was part of that video, but it wasn't like centered around him necessarily. Like he wasn't the main topic, I guess. It was just like somebody in the community who had recorded this video, and like he was at the park. Anyway, it got sent to me by my mom's best friend who lives in Alabama, and as soon as I saw him, I instantly started panicking. Like I had a massive anxiety attack. I was able to get it under control rather quickly, but just seeing him and seeing him make accusations against his caretakers like he used to do against me, like, oh, look at these bruises that I have from being abused. And I'm like, well, that would be absolutely amazing if I ever actually fucking touched you, I remember one time DHS showed up and they're like, well, he has this little scar on his shin where he said that your husband burned him with a cigarette. And I said, that is a miracle because the man hasn't smoked in a year and a half. So I don't know how he would have burned him with a cigarette when he doesn't touch cigarettes. And if it's the scar that I think you're talking about, it's from when he ran away and fell through the floor of an abandoned house. So, it was always like that. And so seeing that video on Facebook, I was just like, oh, the panic, my heart started racing, like my blood pressure went up instantly. And then all of these comments, oh, he's just so precious. I wish I could adopt him and give him the life that he deserves. Oh my gosh, he's so abused. That poor traumatized baby. And I'm like, adopt him. Adopt him. See how that works out for you.
It's so weird to me how like all of like the big like serial killers or whatever, like they always talk about how like handsome and attractive and stuff they were, and when you look at like the kids that are like violent and aggressive, they're like, they just look like sweet little angels. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure nature has designed them to be that way to lure you in, you know? It's what
Probably.
like it happens
Absolutely.
with like all of them. Like they just have sweet little baby faces, or they're so handsome and attractive. They could never. And I'm like, that's your brain lying to you. Don't let it do
Mhm.
that. Like,
Well, I mean, when it comes to psychopathy, one of the diagnostic criteria is superficial charm. And they are able to. And that was one of the issue I had, over the last year. I had finally started reaching out to people that I work with. Like, I had one person in our department that had a background in juvenile, what do you even call that? Juvenile justice? I don't know. Juvie jail. Um, and so, I went to her, like, what? This was before the first um, residential stay. So I guess it was 2 years ago. And I'm like, so what options are there? Like, what is there out there that I can be doing beyond just regular therapy? Because, like, we've been doing that for years. It's not getting us anywhere. And, like, we're at a point, something's going to happen. And, I would prefer to delay her incarceration as long as possible. And there, literally, the answer is, oh, she's so beautiful. She's so nice. You got this. No, I don't got this. That's why I'm asking you for help.
yeah.
And that was the answer I got everywhere. Well, she's beautiful. Okay. That doesn't change the fact that we're, like, at a point of, I am seeing the train coming through the tunnel and nobody is helping here.
Yeah. It's so wild. Like, because they would say that about my kids too, who are all like perpetrators of some form or another. And since they're all young, like all of the kids I worked with were between 17 and 12 for the majority. Sometimes I'd work on the little units and they were like 4 to 11. And I had a 4-year-old that had tried to like stab his grandmother with like a butcher knife. And they're like, but he's so cute. Look at his little cherub face and his little blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm like, this boy tried to murder somebody and then ran through the street saying that he got abused while he was still holding it. I was like, he's not an angel. Stop treating him like that. Like, yes, he's 4 and he deserves to be treated like a 4-year-old, but he also deserves to be treated like a danger because he is. Stop that. Like, that's why like all the Netflix shows make me so uncomfortable because they sexualize like the serial killers, and I'm like, this is how
Stop
we're gonna
it.
end up back in that kind of situation.
Right. Because just because they're cute or sweet little kids or whatever does not negate that there's some alarming things happening that need to be addressed.
Like, their cuteness doesn't change the fact that they will stab you. So,
Exactly.
or give you
And
any other kinds of traumas.
my kid, his main thing for manipulation was playing the victim. And so he could get himself out of trouble by, well, I stole her phone because my mom won't buy me one. And then the tears, you know. And so, like, and the looks, I mean, he was tiny. He was, when he left my home, he was almost 14 years old and he was the size of an 8-year-old, like he was tiny. And so for anybody who looked at him, it was easy for them to see him as a victim because of his size. Even though, like they would just push out of their brain any behavior that he exhibited. The first place he went for treatment was because he was claiming to be suicidal. And the reason I say claiming is because with him specifically, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, but for him specifically, if he was in trouble, he would claim to want to kill himself in an attempt to get out of trouble. And it, like, I took it very, very seriously every time he said it. And after that first time of sending him inpatient, if I started calling hospitals, he was like, never mind, I don't want to go back. I was just saying that. And I'm like, you know, it desensitized me to it after a while. The second time, though, was because he was in trouble and told me that he was going to stab me in the heart. So I called up the hospital. They got him approved before I even got up there, which is rare. I had never had that happen in all of my years at DHS and working with kids who had to go inpatient. Like, the guy was like, I've already got it approved by the doctor, bring him, and all you have to do is sign paperwork and go. I was there for like 15, 30 minutes.
Wow.
And then his therapist called me and said, I'm just going to let you know, I have to call child welfare because he's saying that you want him dead, that you wouldn't care if he died. And I'm like, first of all, those words never came out of my mouth. Second of all, have you looked at the paperwork for why he's in there? Because what actually happened was he told me that he wants me dead and he had plans to make it happen. And she's like, well, that's not what he's saying. And I was just straight up, he's a liar. He is a liar. He's going to tell you whatever he can to make sure that he doesn't get in trouble. And I understand that this is therapy and he's not going to be in trouble with you. I mean, I'm almost a counselor now. I'm just waiting on my licensure, you know, like I know what it looks like. I've been in therapy for years, worked with numerous therapists because of working in child welfare. Like, I know what this is going to look like. I don't expect you to lecture him, nor do I need you to, because that's not what your job is. But in his mind, you are an authority figure. And therefore, you have the ability to punish him. And so he's going to say whatever he can to get out of said punishment. And this time, apparently, I want my child dead. Make it make sense. You know, like, there was just absolutely no regard at all for anything that I was going through. And then, after he got into custody, he wound up having to go to a hospital out of state because there was no beds in state at all. And one of the workers contacted me on Facebook. Like, she wasn't like a therapist or anything like that. I don't know what her job was, but she contacted me on Facebook and she said, I have your kiddo here and he's really wanting to talk to you. And I said, ma'am, do you understand that you've just contacted like a victim of abuse for her abuser? I realize that he's a child, but like, how is that okay? Never mind the fact of like confidentiality and HIPAA and the fact that I didn't even know what hospital he was at. I knew that he had gone, but that was it.
And like, what if you had been abusing him and she contacted you? Like,
exactly.
That's so unprofessional and terrifying and all of the bad things.
Every facility she was in, they told me basically I had to take phone calls from her. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter that, because in order to be, you can't see improvement if the family isn't actively involved. And I'm like, but she's not calling me because she wants to be, you know, to do better, or she misses home. That's not what's happening. But okay. Yeah. So.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.